Thank you so much for joining us. So the degree that we're offering is the M.S.L, the Master of Studies in Law. This is a degree that does not have prerequisites. It doesn't require a particular subject to study in your undergraduate study. It's a 30-credit degree, which means you can do it in just about a year. It is a fully online degree. We're enrolling our first class, so our first class will start this fall of 2018. And the most popular question that we get is, do we need previous knowledge of computer science, or do we need knowledge of law in order to do this degree? And the answer is no, you don't. So that's what we're attempting to achieve with our degree. And as we said, one of the real benefits of doing the degree is you get to study with world-class experts, such as our guest today, Adam Cohen. So let's dive right in. Adam, why don't you tell us about your academic background?
I started at Westchester Day School, where I got my academic discipline and interest in all kinds of intellectual things, like trying to interpret esoteric texts like law books, I guess, and really did not have any knowledge of or interest in technology for a long time, including throughout college. I had been convinced at some early stage that I was not good at math, and so proceeded to not enjoy it and shy away from it. So you can see from my career that some kind of an undergraduate or graduate degree foundation in computer science is not necessary. And the way that a lot of the training is done and certification in the computer security field is based upon having prerequisites for work experience.
Good. So you studied philosophy at Wesleyan University, and you went on to Duke Law School. So they're seeing your certifications. Could you say a bit about what those certifications represent?
People who are in the InfoSec field will be familiar with some of these for sure. The CISSP is the Certified Information Systems Security Professional, probably the most well-known, well-established certification in the information security field, and that's a broad type of certification covering every domain of information security. So that was the first one that I did. It does have some heavy prerequisites in terms of professional experience. And then I really wanted to get some more hands-on kind of training. As you know, I had sort of skipped over that part in terms of technical education because I was a lawyer at the earlier stages of my career. And the Certified Ethical Hacker certification, it's for people who are really technical in the world of hacking and cybersecurity tools. It's very basic. However, for somebody coming to it with a legal background and the CISSP, it was a great opportunity to try all the different, the famous hacking tools that are used on a regular basis when people do what's called penetration testing, which is what ethical hacking is. That's hacking with permission. We do that to test security. So that was fun and really terrific to have in terms of hand-on experience. And then, the CCSP is a very new certification. It's from the same organization that does the CISSP, and that's a certified cloud security professional. And cloud computing is quickly becoming the present. I'm going to say it's the future, but it really is taking over. So I thought that was a great area to focus in.
Fantastic. So tell us about your career path. Your first job out of law school was a litigator at Weil Gotshal, and why don't you tell us about that and what you did from there?
Yeah, so the first day I walked in at Weil, I was in the litigation department, and I was assigned to a case that was all about computer networks. And not only that, I was assigned to work with the experts that we had retained who were the technology experts on the case. I was terrified at first because like I said, I had no background whatsoever in technology at that point. But we had this very difficult mission, which was to explain this very complicated technology that involved market data for traders. And we had to explain this to judges on an arbitration panel, most of whom were not familiar at all with computers or technology. So remember, this is mid-90s, so really people are just getting into email. The internet is just starting to be something that people are using AOL, that kind of thing is predominant. And I learned that really, if you roll up your sleeves and you have patience, you can learn this stuff. And I was assigned to do the cross-examinations of all the technical people. So I really had to learn it. At the same time, the internet was starting to take off. And the number of legal issues that were novel, that were arising with the spread of the internet, were fascinating to me. And I saw it as an opportunity to develop a niche. I saw this as a path. I was very lucky that the firm also had a major practice in digital music copyright. And so this was the time when the file sharing services like Napster were causing, lots of controversy and legal debate. And I was fortunate enough to be involved in representing internet radio companies against the recording industry, and was always tagged as the person who was the tech person to learn the technology, because the other lawyers did not want to touch it. Okay, most of the partners at the firm at that time dealt with emails by asking their secretary to print them out. So it was not too hard. There weren't a lot of volunteers for this role. It was a good spot to be in. And then just, really coincidentally for me, I had the opportunity to do a book on electronic discovery. There was no book on electronic discovery around the turn of the century, what we're talking at this point. The term was very new. It had just become a term, right? So we're starting to have all these cases where email was an important source of evidence, and people were starting to realize maybe just printing it out on paper is not the most efficient way to do this, and dealing with backup tapes, all kinds of problems, but didn't have rules about it. And really the cases were few, relatively few. So we had this opportunity to write a book. I wrote it with one of my partners at Weil, and it was a couple inches thick when it came out. The next day after the manuscript was completed, and prior to the publication, it was cited in what became the most important eDiscovery opinion of all time. Some would argue by Judge Schiffman, Zuby Lake against UBS Warburg. And that really was what started a landslide for me in terms of getting sucked into that issue and really specializing in the space.
That's probably a great lesson for our listeners. So in terms of your motivations, anything that you want to add to that? Or
yeah, I mean, it's easy to be motivated these days, especially because we can see how technology influences absolutely everything that we do, whether it's, personal life or business. To me, it feels like technology is almost an extension of ourselves, or some kind of connective tissue between us and the outside world. And you look at the issues that are in the headlines that are not restricted to specialists in the field, that everyone is talking about: cybersecurity, personal data privacy, etc. You realize more and more this is what the world is about, and that's exciting.
Absolutely. So how it's transforming life, and we could obviously have a very deep and rich discussion about this, and especially we're on the verge of what may be an AI revolution, right? Artificial intelligence, about how our computers will be given something of a mandate, will actually work through problems themselves as opposed to being programmed at every step of the way. How do you see these things changing life, and where are there going to be jobs about this?
Well, you know what? This is an important point for people to consider if they are thinking about pursuing training or education and professional service in this kind of field. The change is constant. You have to be comfortable with that. And you have to be comfortable with the idea that the pace of the change is accelerating. So if you think forward, I have learned to constantly advance my predictions about how soon things are going to change. They're going to happen sooner than you think. And to say, what's going to happen in 10 years, to speculate about that is really an eternity in technology terms. In 5 years, I am somewhat concerned that we may look a little bit like the movie The Matrix. Mm-hmm. Those of you who have tried virtual reality technology today, it's absolutely incredible. And I have no doubt that a lot more and more of our interaction is going to take place in that way, so that we will not have to leave our desks to have meetings with people that feel like their real life meetings. We will not have to move to go on vacation, visit beautiful places. I was stunned by the realism of even the lower end VR technology, like what they have with the PlayStation 4.
Mm-hmm.
You know, certainly I think VR is a big part of it. And it's the other thing that you see is just automation, the trend of greater and greater automation with the benefit of freeing people for creative kinds of pursuits. Usually when we think of automation, when we think of like robots and stuff like that, we're concerned that people's jobs are going to be replaced. They're coming after the humans, basically. And to some extent, of course, that's true. But to me, I see the possibility that the tools provide in terms of us not having to be spending all of our time doing things that are not creative, that are mechanical type things. Dealing with the format on my word processing document, but much more complex things in enterprise technology, like managing a huge fleet of servers or something. So I think those benefits are going to be really changing the world in artistic and creative ways that we can't even predict.
And what kind of career opportunities for one that specializes in data and privacy? How will that change the world for them?
So this has opened up so many opportunities that didn't exist before for all kinds of functions and professions. It really is kind of an answer to that concern that the technology is taking our jobs away, because every time the technology changes and there's new technology introduced, the whole landscape of technology with the cloud and the fog and the Internet of Things expands and deepens, and now we need people that understand this stuff. And just to give examples, you see unbelievable migration to cloud services by business enterprises. The complexity of those services now, take a look at what AWS, Amazon Web Services, offers hundreds of different services, different technologies, and now there are all kinds of certifications in AWS. No one person can master all of those things, and that creates significant demand. Like I said, the lawyers still need to focus on law, and there's no way to practice full-time as a lawyer with a niche and at the same time be an expert in a professional way in all this technology. Mm-hmm. So there is a need for help there, increasing numbers of regulations and requirements of all kinds that directly address technology. And so, yes, we have lawyers who are experts in those, but the technical side of that goes much deeper. Remember, I said that every technical choice has a legal implication, and the lawyers need help with that. So we see people who are experts in forensics. We see people who are experts. We see kids coming out of college right now with economics degrees who know how to do data analytics and who are programming and stuff. Security is such a broad field with so many domains, everything from physical security to behavioral analytics, artificial intelligence. I mean, it's all opening up. I mentioned cloud computing, which is incredibly vast. You see a much greater attention being paid to tasks or occupations, fields that past they weren't associated with a lot of importance. Let's say records management. Uh-huh. I think most business, legal, and compliance people now understand just how important records management is. Everyone is realizing what's going on with their digital privacy, and companies are reacting to that and being much more sensitive to it, and now being asked by regulators to incorporate privacy in everything that they do from an IT point of view. So there are tremendous opportunities in every field you look at that is kind of under the rubric of information governance, whether it's data privacy or info security or eDiscovery, et cetera. Each of those kind of subfields, there are many opportunities.
So if you think about within a corporate structure, there are going to be many job titles that sort of brush against this area if not working it directly, right? So if one does a search for jobs in the field of data and privacy law, a lot of what will come up with something like a privacy officer, right, or a privacy information officer, something like that, right? So that job within a company, does that person do now, and what are they going to be doing differently 5 years from now?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it really depends on the organization. To some extent, varies by industry because there are specific regulations that will, have huge impact on how you do your job. In that respect, depending on what industry you're in, the best example right now has got to be financial services. The very complex fabric of regulation, but these kinds of professionals, like the privacy officer or any of the other ones that are involved in these matters, they are in a situation where they have to work with others in the business. The old days, to use security as an example, security, maybe the flip side of privacy, but it was considered part of IT, right? So you had IT security, and nobody paid attention. The lawyers, compliance people, chief executives, they didn't really care what was going on there. They saw it as an IT thing. Now, that has completely changed.
Sure.
And so these areas like security and privacy, they are going to draw in people who want to participate and who want to have input from every angle, every functional unit of the business, including legal and compliance. They become much more important. They become much more jobs which require much more of an ability to build consensus with a group of diverse stakeholders, really moved away from being kind of a super technical, hyper-specialized kind of a job to more integrated and woven into the fabric of the enterprise, at least at places that are evolving and doing it the right way.
I think that's very well put. Now, the field of eDiscovery, which is also an area where you have considerable expertise and you talked about your work in it, how is that role changing? I mean, are we going to see new software packages that are going to be able to address this so that people that don't have a lot of technology will be able to work in this space in the future? They'll essentially be pushing an eDiscovery button. I mean, how does that look?
Yeah, well, there's a constant push and pull here. And it's true that eDiscovery has, as a market, as an industry, it has matured tremendously over the past 10 years or so. It has become less expensive in certain respects. However, in other respects, and it's hard to imagine the easy button really conquering this. I think there is so it's still going to be a vibrant and growing industry. Because it's true that some of the basic and previously more difficult and more manual tasks, like gathering corporate email, or and sifting, filtering it for eDiscovery purposes, I think that's where you're going to see some big changes, driven mostly by the move of enterprise IT to the cloud. And big providers who now essentially are the data centers for big companies like Amazon and Microsoft will get to the point where these functionality is built into that environment, so that the process of getting the email ready to produce from the corporate repository is going to be simpler. But think about what's going on outside of that, which is always going to be still relevant. I mean, you have people running around with their devices, which there is a push and pull where the manufacturers are trying to make these devices easier to secure, in the sense of keeping them, keeping what you want to be secret, encrypting the devices in ways that can't be broken, etc. I mean, there's just more and more spread of new technology. You've got new apps, new devices, etc. So it's hard to see, that there's going to be an easy button anytime soon that's going to take care of all of eDiscovery. And that means that the people who are going to add value going forward are not going to be the people that learn how to do mechanical tasks, processing large volumes of email, but it's going to be the people that have their finger on the pulse of what is changing and are constantly learning what's new and developing methodologies and tools for dealing with those new things. So, the field has changed a lot since the heyday, I would say, about 2006 to 2010, where eDiscovery providers would charge thousands of dollars per gigabyte, to handle data. But there are other challenges. It's just it's changing in that respect.